Hello, thanks for joining us for ENCORE's weekly film extravaganza. Today, from the principled reporter in Kill the Messenger to the sleazy cameraman in Nightcrawler, journalists, both brave and self-serving, are the focus of today's programme. Also on the show, our French pick of the week, the funny and insightful documentary about political cartoonists from around the world. Cartoonists, Footsoldiers of Democracy. And what if dogs ruled the world, or at least Budapest? White God mixes the birds and Planet of the Apes in this canine revenge caper. For her take on that and more, France 24's film critic Lisa Nessleson is here. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, Eve.
Thanks for joining us. Now, 3 films about journalists, excuse me, this week. It's about time we got some attention.
Indeed.
We're starting with Nightcrawler. Everyone's talking about that with Jake Gyllenhaal. Now, it takes place in the cutthroat world of TV news, where a cameraman will do anything to get the story. What an idea.
What an idea, indeed. It is a very entertaining indictment of the sordid underbelly of sort of local will-do-anything TV news in America anyway. And nobody would say that in the U.S. in my lifetime, American TV news has been pulled up toward the highest common denominator. So Jake Gyllenhaal plays Lou Bloom, who's a sort of unscrupulous, dishonest individual who stumbles onto the fact that TV stations are willing to pay money for on-the-scene reporting from stuff that their own cameramen couldn't get to, and he takes an approach to that they don't teach in journalism school. Let's watch.
Repeat the police. I will never ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. Excuse me, I have something you'll be very excited about.
You have a good eye. I want you to contact me when you have something.
Something like this.
Think of our newscast as a screaming woman running down the street with her throat cut.
You will be seeing me again.
Jake looks very creepy there.
Indeed he is. The character of Lou Bloom is very creepy, and part of it is the way the actor looks. He lost at least 20 pounds, maybe more, so his eyes sort of pop out of his head, and he has this delivery, these robotic pronouncements that sort of sound like a sinister self-help brochure. He's really determined to get ahead.
You're American. Do you think this is about life in America today?
Well, it certainly underlines the idea that the ends justify the means, and what we've come to believe is important for the public to know. I personally don't need to know about every fire, every car crash, but the idea that that's taken precedence over the state of the world, the state of the nation, yeah, I think it does sort of reflect, and not so well.
Okay. Well, from a creepy sleazeball to a film about a real-life reporter, Gary Webb. The film's called Kill the Messenger. Why have they decided to make a movie about him?
Gary Webb was a very interesting reporter who stumbled onto an aspect of the Iran-Contra affair that's so incredible that he had to really research it before he published his story in the San Jose Mercury News. And what he basically found, and this sounds like you'd have to be on crack cocaine to think that this could happen, is that in order to finance the Contras in Nicaragua, because the U.S. Congress would not authorize that, the government, in the form of the CIA, sort of looked the other way as massive quantities of crack cocaine were deliberately brought into the United States and fobbed off on inner city, mostly black communities, so that the proceeds from that could be used to fund the illegal Contra. Well, you know, like I said, you'd have to be on crack. And he found evidence of that, published it, and people in high places really weren't happy that he had connected the dots. Let's watch.
Gary Webb, San Jose Mercury News.
You believe in conspiracy theories, Gary?
No, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. Conspiracies, yes. If I believe it, there's nothing theory about it.
Was the government aware that you were smuggling tons of cocaine into the United States?
Yes, the government knew.
This leads to very sensitive national security matters.
National security and crack cocaine, the same sentence. Does that not sound strange to you?
I'm going to tell you the whole truth. I'm going to introduce you to people you should talk to. And then you will be faced with the most important decision of your life.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Deciding whether to share it or not.
So Gary Webb uncovered a massive story. Did he get great acclaim for it?
Well, he was the kind of reporter who believed that the people should know the truth, and at first he got lots of acclaim for it. He was on all the major news shows and talk shows. He even won a major journalism award. But then people in high places turned against him, or well, they were not in favor of it from the very start. And the major newspapers, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the New York Times, missed this entirely, so they weren't really happy either. And they just basically hounded him out of the profession he loved.
And freedom of the press, as we know, is enshrined in the US Constitution. Is it true in practice, though?
Well, more and more publications that want to inform their readers or their viewers are finding cut budgets, not a lot of money for investigative reporting, not a lot of beat reporters who can sense if something sounds like it's not quite right. You've got one person covering, you know, all of Europe sometimes, getting on a plane, and they don't have the connections to get the quotes, to get to the bottom of the story. Lots of insidious things going on with advertisers and not displeasing them because there's so few of them. And so I think the state of journalism is sort of in crisis, but there's still people who absolutely are willing to take the risks to tell the important stories.
And there's still very good stuff here on France 24, so
Goes
make
without
sure you
saying.
keep watching. Now, staying with the theme of freedom of the press, the French documentary Cartoonists, Footsoldiers of Democracy is out on DVD this week. How often do political cartoonists run into censorship?
Well, it really depends on what country you're trying to publish your cartoons in. If you're in places like Venezuela or China or Algeria or Tunisia or Russia or Syria, you might run into trouble. Here in France and the US, people have a freer hand. But for example, in Syria, a cartoonist was attacked by goons and had his hands broken so that he couldn't draw. As soon as Putin was sworn in as president, it became sort of off limits to do political cartoons. An article was added to the Constitution by César Chavez that you could not portray the president's face in cartoons. That sort of limits your possibilities.
It sounds very heavy as a documentary, is it?
No, really, because the sort of continuing thread is the wonderful French political cartoonist Plantu, who has worked for Le Monde for over 40 years. He's one of the co-founders of Cartooning for Peace and the idea that the pen can be mightier than the sword. And he's got a real sense of humor. He's the guy who in 1991 had the chutzpah to go to Yasser Arafat and ask him to draw a picture of the Palestinian flag and the Israeli flag, and then had him sign it. And then he went and saw Shimon Peres, showed him the drawing and said, would you please sign the Israeli side? And he sort of brokered his own fictional peace agreement just through magic markers and two heads of state. So it's got a lot of humor in it.
Yeah, it sounds like fascinating stuff. Well, away from our journalism theme now, unless you think of us as having a pack mentality, White God is a film that's being compared to Hitchcock's The Birds, but it's about dogs.
It's about dogs. It's about mongrels and half-breeds. You can apply that to the actual four-legged kind, or perhaps the kind of people that people might not want in their country because they think it's adulterating it. It's the story of a teenage girl, Lily. Her parents are divorced. She has to go live with her dad for a while, and she brings her beloved dog with her. But there has recently been an edict that you have to pay a special tax if you have a mixed-breed, impure dog, and her dad is not going to do that, so he forces her to abandon her dog. She spends the rest of the bulk of the movie trying to find the dog. The dog has adventures, some of them quite terrible. Let's take a look.
They don't kill the poor little girl, do they?
Oh, far be it for me to reveal something like that. You know, they only used mixed breed dogs that they got in shelters, 280 of them. And the director says they're just like actors. You see their real emotions. They didn't use any computer-generated special effects. And that's got incredible power. And you've got a sort of fairy tale parable about what happens when you treat people or animals badly.
And it's a Hungarian film. Is it going to make it internationally?
Well, it got an enormous amount of attention at Cannes. People from all over the world really liked it. I know it's coming out in the U.S. in a few months. It's going to represent Hungary in the foreign language Oscar competition. And I think it's been picked up all over the world, yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. So, as well as killer dogs and hardcore films about journalists, you're a big fan of cartoons, Lisa, and there's a film festival in Paris this week dedicated to them. Tell us some more.
It's the 12th edition of the Crossroads of Animation at the Forum des Images. It's an incredibly dense program. They have 30 screenings in just 4 days. They're going to spotlight very topical Palestine in animation and also eroticism in animation, which is a vaster topic than you'd think. For example, years ago, there was the start of a series of films called Kirikou that takes place in an African village. I had to review it for American publications, and they ran into flack because they had drawn the village women topless. In other words, you know, 2 little lines, but that was considered heinous, and you couldn't show that to kids. One of their guests is going to be the Belgian cartoonist Pisha, who has a sort of freewheeling approach to sex also. So political animation and eroticism in animation.
Okay, well, if you don't like boobs in cartoon form, I would look away now. We'll leave you with the very saucy trailer for the festival. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Bonsoir. Vous aimez les dessins animés? Oui. Oui. Je continue là? Oui. Oh, oh.
Oh, baby.